microphone and space each other, and then hooking each other up. Yeah. So, which is why I was just double checking we tested that because it was really noticeable. We'll also just operationally just double check.
Good evening, and welcome to this very special meeting regarding age-friendly traffic study. I want to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Qualicum First Nation. Welcome. This is for council. Anything to change the agenda? Seeing no, there's only one item on the agenda, so we're not going to be here for many items, but it's all about the age-friendly transportation plan, so seeing no change of the agenda is adopted by consent. I turn it over to our Director of Engineering, Mr. Weir. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. So we're pleased to have our transportation engineering consultant, Richard Duduel, with us tonight to present his findings in support of the 2023 update of the age-friendly transportation plan. Now, Richard can't be with us in person for personal reasons, but will be observing the proceedings via YouTube and speaking and taking questions via the telephone, a format we have successfully used before, and we appreciate the indulgence of council and the public so that we can accommodate Richard. Now, regarding the work, between updates of the age-friendly transportation plan, staff compile transportation issues and data of our own observation and concerns and complaints received from the public and provide them to our consultant for analysis and to identify possible solutions. The presentation tonight represents Richard's preliminary findings for council's review. Following the presentation and after council members and the public's feedback, we look for council to endorse Richard's update and prepare the final report. Now tonight, Richard has a PowerPoint presentation, and I would suggest that we allow Richard to go through the presentation. It will take about 25 minutes, after which we will have plenty of time to either go back and review any of the slides if people have questions and concerns, or present questions and concerns of their own. And our format tonight will not be at the podium and the microphone, but will be at the telephone adjacent to Mayor Westbrook. So with that, I would turn it over to, through the chair, to Richard.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Good evening, Mayor and Council, staff, members of the public. Thank you for accommodating me virtually. I wish I could be there, but this is the next best thing. So I will go through this presentation for about 25 minutes, and then, as Bob says, we'll have questions and discussion afterwards. So, first of all, this is the second presentation regarding the 2023 update of the age-friendly transportation plan. Tonight we'll be reviewing preliminary projects and the priorities assigned to those projects. We had a presentation back in June that you may have attended or watched online. It was regarding the issues that had been identified and what the data we were going to collect to further investigate those issues, and that's what we've done since then. The town has collected a bunch of traffic data over the summer, and we had a closer look at a lot of the issues to come up with the projects that we'll be talking about tonight. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to talk about before we get into actually talking about the details of the plan is what is age-friendly. It's called the Age-Friendly Transportation Plan, and the reason for that was that originally, when we did the first version of this plan, the town received a grant to prepare an age-friendly transportation plan. So age-friendly, not everyone's clear on what that means, so it's basically we're making sure we accommodate persons of all ages and abilities and all modes of transportation. In particular, we want to make sure we're accommodating people that are walking, cycling, and using transit, and we're focusing on what we call vulnerable road users. Those are pedestrians, cyclists, persons with disabilities, seniors, children. We're including everyone, of course, in all modes of transportation, but we're making sure in particular that those people and those modes of transportation are accommodated. Now, as I said, not everyone's sure what age-friendly means, and we have received comments over the years that it's maybe not the best name for a plan. If council wishes, we could always rename this plan. At this point, we could call it something like the Community Transportation Plan. I don't think we're necessarily wedded to the term age-friendly, but for the purposes of tonight, I'm to continue to call it that. So next slide, please. So when we did the original age-friendly plan, we established two goals, and those goals have been maintained throughout the process. The goals are to improve mobility and improve safety. So we basically want to improve mobility, again, by all modes of transportation, but with a particular emphasis on what we call active transportation, walking and cycling. And we want to improve safety, again, for everyone, but with a particular emphasis on vulnerable road users. Those, again, are pedestrians, cyclists, children, seniors, not just people driving cars. That's not our only consideration. Again, we're trying to accommodate everyone of all ages and abilities. Next slide, please. And so the purpose of the plan is to identify and document transportation issues, so things that need to be dealt with, and then look at those issues, identify what the appropriate solutions are, and then this third item is probably the most important part of the plan, and that is to prioritize the projects that address those solutions. So for every issue, there'll be a solution. There'll be, as you will see when we get into it, there's a lot of projects. And so really the challenge for the town is, where do we start? Which ones do we do first, and which ones will give us the best bang for our buck? There's also some guidance that has been provided in previous versions of the plan regarding how data is collected and analyzed and how transportation facilities are designed. So next slide, please. So this will be the fifth update of the age-friendly transportation plan since it was originally adopted in 2013. So what we've done over the years is we've updated the priorities in the plan. Remember, that was one of the key features of this plan is a list of priorities, which projects are the highest priorities. So we have updated those on a regular basis as some projects are completed and as new projects are identified and conditions change, and maybe the priorities of some projects go up or down as well. Back in 2017, we also updated the plan to incorporate the cycling plan that had been developed originally in 2009. So all the projects from the cycling plan were brought into the age-friendly transportation plan in 2017. And for this update, there's a particular focus on Highway 19A, and in the same time that we've been doing the age-friendly transportation plan update, we've been also doing a Highway 19A safety study, and the results of that are now included in the age-friendly plan, and I'll be talking about those tonight. Next slide, please. So before I get into what we're proposing and what's going to happen, let me just remind everyone of the things that have happened over the past 10 years as a result of the age-friendly transportation plan. There's been a number of projects that have been implemented over the past 10 years. You have handouts that show all the projects that are proposed to be in the new or the updated age-friendly plan, but there's also a summary there with a bunch of projects in green. And those are the projects, again, that have been implemented over the past 10 years. A number of improvements for pedestrians, especially focusing on crossings at major roads and trails for cycling, multi-use pathways, we call them trails as well, but a lot of trails for both pedestrians and cyclists, as well as some improvements to the waterfront connection and some improvements to roads. One of the big ones, of course, being the roundabout down at the foot of Memorial, down at Highway 19A, a couple of improvements along Memorial as well at Village Way and Crescent, where those intersections have been improved, and some other measures along roads. So a lot of stuff's been done to date over the past 10 years, and so those projects have been removed from the age-friendly plan over the years, but we wanted to keep track of them, so they're listed on your handout at the bottom there in green. So next slide, please. So I talked about this back in June when I gave a presentation to council. There's been a whole bunch of issues that have been identified since the last update of the age-friendly plan, which was in 2019, but just before the pandemic. and more than 40 issues, in fact, that have been identified. Those I've broadly grouped in 4 categories here, and I'll talk about them now as we get into what's in the new plan. Highway 19A is the key category for this update of the age-friendly plan, and as I mentioned, we kind of in parallel did a Highway 19A safety study, which has identified a number of things to be done through the age-friendly plan. Next slide, please. So, Highway 19A, the issues there fall into generally 5 categories of speeding, safety for pedestrians and cyclists. There's some issues related to parking and some issues related to intersection safety. So those were all, we examined all of those as part of the Highway 19A safety study. The town collected a bunch of traffic data over the summer, not just on Highway 19A, but elsewhere through the town. And in your handout, there's one page that actually summarizes the results of the traffic data, the speed data collection. So there's a bunch of projects. Sorry, next slide, please. And we'll just go to the slide number 9 next. There's a bunch of projects that have been identified on Highway 19A, and one of your handouts is a map that shows those slides. So those projects include, again, pedestrian crossings and some other features for pedestrians, some features in the road itself on Highway 19A intended as a form of traffic calming to discourage speeding and unwanted behavior, some improvements to some intersection geometry, and again, some improvements to parking. And then I'll talk at the very end about the idea of a complete street design. We have an opportunity to make some significant changes to the configuration or the character of this Highway 19A, especially along the waterfront. So if we go to the next slide, is actually the map that is also in your handout that shows all these new and current projects on Highway 19A. So the completed ones are in green, the ones that are already in the active and the age-friendly transportation plan, but you haven't yet been implemented, are in dark green, and then in orange are the new projects that we're looking at adding to the plan. Next slide, please. So now we should be on slide 11. So just going to go through some of the key projects here that we're proposing on Highway 19A. The first is more crossings on the highway. It's a lot of comments about how need to get across the highway, how it's not easy to get across the highway. It is a significant barrier, especially for people trying to access the waterfront, even travel between neighborhoods. So this image is a new crossing that was put in just a couple of years ago at Hemsworth, and it incorporates what are called RRFBs. Those are the rapid rectangular flashing beacons. They're the little lights that go off underneath the sign. They flash in the same pattern as for an emergency vehicle. What we call a wigwag. It's not a steady strobe. It's more of an erratic flashing, which attracts people's attention more. It's more visible to approaching motorists. In addition, this crossing incorporates median islands, so we have, as proposed to be added to the age-friendly plan, we have median islands at more crossings, at new crossings, as well as at some intermediate locations along the waterfront. Median islands generally can reduce traffic speeds to about 3 to 8 kilometers an hour, which is significant. We actually were able to measure the change here at Hemsworth. Before there's a radar sign, a speed display sign to the east of Hemsworth, but before that went in, we were able to collect some traffic data just to see the effects of these median islands, and they resulted in about a 3 to 4 kilometer an hour reduction in what we call the 85th percentile traffic speed. And that's the speed that 85% of the traffic is traveling at or below. It means 15% of the people are traveling above that speed. That's the speed that is typically used as a measure of traffic speed. So here at Hemsworth, we saw these median islands reduce that speed by about 3 to 4 kilometers an hour. Next slide, please. And I mentioned this speed display sign that's actually just west of Hall Road, so it's east of Hemsworth, facing westbound traffic. This is where the speed limit has changed from 70 down to 50, and this is a little reminder after that change to make sure people are traveling at a slower speed. We have one here, like I said, westbound at Hall Road. There's a proposal now to add to the age-friendly plan another sign at the other end of Highway 19A when you're coming into Qualicum Beach from the west at what's called Higson Crescent. That's just east of Laburnum Road. So as you're coming into Qualicum Beach, the speed limit has dropped to 50 just before Qualicum Beach, but again, it's another chance to remind people. We've seen here reduction in the 85th percentile speed as a result of this sign of 3 kilometers an hour. But what's more significant is that 30% fewer vehicles are speeding when they go past this sign now that it's in place than before it was there. So this basically takes off the top end of the speeding as opposed to, a 3 kilometer an hour speed reduction might not sound like much. So it's really what's significant here is the reduction in the percentage of vehicles that are speeding. So proposing another sign at the other end of Highway 19A coming into town. Next slide, please. Now, this is a project that's already in the age-friendly plan. It's actually been in there, I think, from way back almost to the beginning or right to the beginning. It's an expensive project, which is unfortunately the reason it hasn't happened yet, and the town will require cost-share funding for it, but it is a top 5 priority. This is a high priority to implement. It's a roundabout on Highway 19A at Village Way and Country Club Drive. It's provide a number of benefits. Reduced speeds along the highway is one. Of course, improvement in intersection safety. This is one of the higher crash locations in the town, as well as providing active transportation facilities so that people can get to and across Highway 19A, and as well it would improve egress and access into and out of Eagle Crest, make it a lot easier to get in and out of Eagle Crest at this location. So this project, still in the age-friendly plan, remains a top 5, it is at this point a top 5 priority, and again, hopefully there's an opportunity for some cost share funding down the road to make this thing happen. Next slide, please. So this is an example of an intersection improvement, an improvement to intersection safety just by reconfiguring, in this case, the right turn lane at Bennett Road. So you're traveling eastbound on Highway 19A, making the right turn to go south on Bennett Road. This is a school crossing, and right now it's what we call a pork chop. There's a little triangular island there, and the right turn lane is free flow in the fact that there's no traffic signal controlling that right turn lane, and it's really up to the motorist to pay attention and notice school children in the crosswalk. It's a 70 kilometer an hour speed limit at this point. It's not particularly, these in general pork chop configurations aren't great for pedestrians. So the idea here is to remove that channelized right turn lane, remove the pork chop island, and construct a more conventional right turn lane. So we have a through lane where you can see the car in the red, and the right turn lane that currently goes off into that free flow will now continue up to the intersection where the stop bar is, and then make a right turn as you would at a conventional or what we call normalized intersection. What we have to do here is just relocate that one street light that has the signal heads on it. We have to move that onto a new pole, but otherwise it's a fairly straightforward project. So that's an example of an intersection safety project along Highway 19A. Now, I want to talk about one that's actually right up at the top in terms of priority. It's a top 5 priority. And it's an opportunity that we have because the pavement on Highway 19A, especially on the waterfront, is in really bad shape. It's getting quite rutted, and that does affect safety. It's also a maintenance issue as well. So the town has currently budgeted to repave the section of Highway 19A between Memorial Drive and Crescent Road West within the next couple of years. So that repaving gives us the opportunity to say, hey, after you're done the paving, let's maybe look at putting the lane lines and such in a different spot on the road. Let's look at the opportunity to make the road a bit different than it is today. It's actually difficult to do it today because of the rutting. You really can't change the lane lines because then people are going to be driving in the wrong spots on the road as compared to where the ruts are, and that creates a safety issue. So we really can't do anything today, but this repaving opportunity gives us a chance to consider what's I would call a complete street design. This is an example of Bowen Road in Nanaimo. It's not perfectly applicable to Highway 19A because Bowen Road is a 4-lane road, but what's happened here is they've taken a 4-lane road, they've made some changes to the cross-section of the road, they've added in protected bicycle lanes, landscaped islands, generally improved the road for other modes of transportation, not just the automobile. And that's really the point here. The point is to improve safety, make sure, again, we're accommodating everyone, and at the same time do some things that can discourage speeding. So next slide, please. These are some of the features that a complete street would include. It doesn't have to have all these features, but generally we're looking at most of these features on a complete street. And the one I want to particularly highlight is the idea of narrower traffic lanes. We did look at this in the past, at the options to narrow the lanes, but as I mentioned, because of the rutting in the pavement, it's actually not a practical thing to do until the road is repaved. So now that there's a budget and a project to repave the road, now we can look at making traffic lanes narrower. Studies have actually shown that it results in less collisions and, most importantly, lower speeds. So we can achieve some traffic calming just by narrowing traffic lanes. But the other thing that does is that now gives us some room to start looking at adding other features in and along the roadway. So again, features for pedestrians and cyclists, median islands and curb extensions and other things that help calm traffic and discourage speeding. And we can look at improving and adding parking bays, access to transit stops, and then just features like landscaping and rain gardens and other things that provide some climate change resilience. So there's the opportunity to look at adding a number of features here. So that's part of this complete street design. And as I said, there's that can happen within the next couple of years as an add-on to the repaving project that's already in the works. Next slide, please. So that's a quick overview of Highway 19A. Now I'd like to talk about the other roads in Qualicum Beach and other things that we're planning elsewhere in the town. Again, in your handout, you have two maps, one that shows the projects on Highway 19A. The other map shows all the other projects throughout the town. And again, we show the completed projects in green. Dark green is the ones that are already in the age-friendly plan, and orange is the projects that are proposed to be added to the plan. All of these projects, Highway 19A and all the other locations, are on that list of priorities that is also in your handout. So for Memorial Avenue, these again are kind of the key issues that we heard and I talked about in my last presentation to council: pedestrian safety, some pathways, particularly the connection from the pathway along Memorial that lasts a little bit into the downtown, some concerns about intersection speeding and intersection safety and speeding, and also some concerns about the traffic impacts of new development, down where the bus garage site, Naked Naturals, that area. So let's go to the next slide. That'll be slide 18. First thing I want to talk about, and probably this is the big project on Memorial. It's in the top 10 priorities. It's not in the top 5 primarily because we can't do anything yet, and all because of this rail line. The issue here at First Avenue is that the rail crossing is too close to the intersection if we were to signalize it, which is what we want to do. We want to add a traffic signal at First Avenue, and that's been in the age-friendly plan for a while. But the problem is with that intersection so close to the traffic, to the rail line, we have to do a bunch of other stuff because it is still, believe it or not, an active rail line. Even though there's no activity on it, is still considered and classified as an active rail line. And all those extra requirements would be imposed on the town. So it's quite onerous what it would take to make a traffic signal here with an active rail line. The town has been pursuing with the province requesting to reconcile the status of the rail line, and if that the moment that happens, then we can then consider this project. So for now, we're kind of precluded from doing what we ultimately want to do here. There's a couple of projects that we can do in the short term, in the interim. And the most significant there is to take the pathway that comes up Memorial from the waterfront past Village Way and continue that all the way down to the corner there on the right-hand side of this image. And we would do that by narrowing the roadway and extending what's currently a sidewalk, extending that, widening that into the road to create a pathway, and then bring that to that corner. We still can't have a crossing on the north side of the intersection, unfortunately, because it's too close to the railway tracks. impact, but at least we can get people to this intersection where there are marked crossings, as opposed to what happens right now, which is the pathway just kind of peters out this side of Village Way. Another thing we want to do there, and it's just a minor thing, but it is in the plan, is to add a street light on the northwest corner of the intersection, just where on the other side of this white car in the image. Now, if we can go to the next slide, please. So other things we want to do are along Memorial Avenue. There's some operations, actions which are part of they're mentioned, the first one's mentioned in the age-friendly plan, but they're not specific projects that are listed in the age-friendly plan. They're more just things that can be done even today as separate from the plan. One is just to start using, the town's acquired a new mobile speed display. It doesn't look quite like that, but it's basically this idea. It's parked at the side of a road. It's like the speed display sign that I was talking about earlier on Highway 19A, but this one can be moved around. Use this at a couple of key locations on Memorial Avenue in the vicinity of Hoy Lake, and down south towards where you're coming into town. The other one is to designate the lanes on Fern Road eastbound at Memorial, to designate that right-hand lane as a right turn only lane. Currently there's no lane designation there, and it can be confusing when people try to go straight through the intersection in both lanes at the same time. That's actually a bit of a safety issue. So that's something that will be done there. But that leads into my next comment, which is right now associated with the bus garage, there's some work being done, including some traffic analysis of the intersections in the downtown, and it's to be expected there'll be some recommendations that come out of that bus garage study regarding transportation, and those recommendations, when they come out next year, can be added into the age-friendly plan, and some of those might involve the intersection, for example, at Fern Road and Memorial, intersection at 4th and Memorial as well. So we're waiting for the results of that study, and those will be added into the age-friendly transportation plan when those recommendations are made and the study's finished. Next slide, please. We should be on slide 20 now. This one is, now I'm just going to talk about other roads elsewhere in town. And again, I'm only going to hit some of the higher priority projects and maybe not cover everything off. Again, similar issues to what we're hearing on elsewhere. Speeding being an issue on a few key roads, especially First Avenue near the park, where there's a playground zone. Pedestrian crossings again at major roads, some pathways and sidewalks, and again, intersection safety. So next slide. So this is First Avenue, past the community park. It's a 40-kilometer-an-hour playground zone, which means from dawn to dusk, the speed limit is 40 kilometers an hour. You can, in the middle of the night, you can drive through here at 50, but during the daytime, from dawn to dusk, it's 40 kilometers an hour. But unfortunately, it's a straight, flat road, which is the problem in a few roads in Qualicum Beach. So it's not surprising that when you have a straight, flat road like this, where you can see long distances down the road, that the speeds are higher than 40 kilometers an hour. In fact, the town collected some speed data that found people are going 85th percentile speeds of 66 to 67 kilometers an hour in this playground zone during the daytime. So when the speed limit is 40 kilometers an hour, people are going 26, 27 kilometers an hour faster than that. So I proposed a couple of things to be added to the age-friendly plan to deal with speeding in the playground zone. A raised crosswalk at Rye Road, which is the intersection where at the other end of the park, where you can drive into the park. And typically a raised crosswalk will give you a speed reduction of 5 to 13 kilometers an hour. Then sort of behind where this picture is taken, just back towards Cedar Street, adding a speed table. And again, that will give a speed reduction of about, in this case, about 6 to 13 kilometers an hour. So at either end of the 40 kilometer an hour playground zone, that we were adding a raised crosswalk and a speed table to bring down those speeds. I don't expect that they will get down to 40 kilometers an hour, the 85th percentile speed, but what we'd like to see is something in the 40s. And so that's what we're looking for, and we'll collect some traffic data 6 months or 12 months after they're in place to see what effect they've had. Also, of course, this is an opportunity to deploy that mobile speed sign that I talked about earlier. This is a location where that mobile speed sign can be deployed as sort of a supplement or a complement to the raised crosswalk and the speed table. Next slide, please. So this is this illustration here is Village Way at KSS at Qualicum Secondary. So there's a few things we want to do along Village Way and several locations on Village Way. This is a project, this traffic calming, it's already in the age-friendly transportation plan, and it's a top 5 priority as well. So this is a number of things right in front of the school. So it's a couple of crosswalks being added in to help students cross the road here to get to and from park cars when they're picked up and dropped off. A couple of median islands are being added in, some curb extensions, parking bays, sidewalk where there isn't one. So a number of things to improve pedestrian safety and discourage speeding along this section of Village Way. Further to the east, we're looking at some new RRFB crossings, well, one to the west at Berwick. There's a crossing there right now, but adding RRFB, those flashing lights to that, and new crossings at RRFB crossings at Nootka and Hollywood. And the flashing crossing that's at Hemsworth Road would be upgraded to RRFBs. It's the old style crossing that's just a flashing amber beacon, but it flashes at a regular rate, and studies have actually shown that those they don't have quite as good an effect as the new RRFBs do. They don't grab motorists' attention quite as much, maybe and convey the same sense of urgency or imperative to stop. So certainly that's a location to upgrade to RRFBs because of the proximity to the school. It's used by a lot of school kids. We're also looking at adding a speed display sign coming westbound, just east of Hemsworth Road. This is where the speed limit goes from 60 to 50. So in the same way that we did it on Highway 19A, just west of Hall Road, we'd be doing that there as well to encourage people to slow down coming into that 50-kilometer-an-hour zone. And at the east end of Village Way, and this would be actually tied in with the roundabout project, is to extend a pathway along Village Way along the north side from Nootka Road up to Highway 19A and south to connect to the pathway that goes to Arrowview Elementary School. And you'll see that again on your handout that's illustrated on there. Next slide, please. So some other roads, and throughout the town, there's a number of other projects shown on your handout. You'll see them in orange there. A couple of new RRFB crossings. Jones Street at Fern Road, again, that's an existing crossing that would be upgraded to RRFBs. And then another crossing, a new one on Bennett Road at Sunrise Drive. That's kind of the east end of Fern Road. So if you take the Dollymount Trail and then you head east on Fern Road and you pop out on Bennett Road, there's nothing there for you right now to get across Bennett Road, so that's a crossing there. And then pedestrian signal on Rupert at Arbutus. We can't use RRFBs there because the speed limit's 70 kilometers an hour, so that would be a pedestrian signal. Another pedestrian signal that we're showing in the plan already that's, well, actually, it's at Milner Gardens. I think that one might be, we're adding that to the plan as well. So again, because that's a 70 kilometer an hour section of Highway 19A, that's a pedestrian signal rather than the RRFBs. The other one here I've listed is the Downtown Trail. That's the sort of the missing section of pathway. Right now you can travel from the Laburnum Road all along the pathway. You get to Arbutus and then you travel along Harlech, and there's a little section of trail that brings you out from Harlech out to Beach, but there's nothing from Beach over to Memorial. When you get to Memorial, you can keep going east on the Dollymount Trail. You can go north on the Memorial Trail, but that section between Beach Road and Memorial Avenue is the missing link. So that's the Downtown Trail. That's, again, a top 5 priority. It kind of connects up all the trails we have today. Ultimately, it would tie in with a new traffic signal at First Avenue, but it's also something we can do in the interim. Crescent Road, we put speed tables in on Crescent Road and a raised crossing when traffic was diverted around the roundabout that was being constructed on Highway 19A at Memorial. The speeds on Crescent Road east of Memorial came down significantly as a result of the speed tables, but west of Memorial, the speed tables are spaced fairly far apart, farther apart than they should be for effective effective speed management. So we're proposing a couple more speed tables and a raised crossing at Bay Street on Crescent Road, in addition to the speed tables and the one raised crossing at Arbutus that are already there. Now, there's a few other projects that are in the age-friendly plan that are sort of general, that address issues such as stop sign compliance and trail etiquette. So the first one is at the railway crossings in particular, people are not stopping. Now, you might say, well, there's no trains, but if someone is entering the road just beyond the railway crossing and they're expecting a motorist to stop at a stop sign and they don't, then that is a safety issue. So to encourage stop sign compliance at the railway crossing, their age-friendly plan is suggesting centerline stop signs, which are little stop signs mounted in the middle of the road to complement the stop sign on the other road. They have been shown again to increase compliance. Ultimately, if the status of the rail line is downgraded from active, then all of that changes. But in the meantime, the stop signs are required at the rail crossings. There's also a project to add some trail etiquette signage to pathways and bicycle routes, wayfinding signage. But in particular, the trail etiquette signage, there's been a few complaints over the past few years about conflicts and people not really understanding how to adequately or properly share the path. So the idea here is just some additional signage to guide people and encourage them to share the path safely, pedestrians and cyclists and others. This example on the right is just an image from the city of Eugene in Oregon. Other projects that we've got are some accessibility improvements, some curb ramps at Arrowview Elementary School. Right now there's nothing to get down into the road from the sidewalk on Bennett, and some walkways for accessibility and pedestrian safety. So there's a couple of accessibility projects in there as well. So now I'm just going to just wind up by talking about priorities. And in your handout, you have a list. It's a long list of all these projects that are on the map. In fact, some of the projects that are on the list aren't on the map. The map was starting to get cluttered, so I left a few of them off. But all the orange ones that are on that list are on the map. And what I've done is I've taken all the new projects as well as all the existing projects, reevaluated the existing ones, evaluated the new ones using these criteria, and then what that does is allows us to see which projects would give us what I say the highest return on our investment. We're looking for basically the maximum benefit when it goes back to those objectives of improving mobility and improving safety. So these are the 6 criteria that we use on the right-hand side. 3 of the criteria are weighted as well, double, so safety, vulnerable users, and network contribution, they get a weighting of 2 compared to the other ones. The scoring, or the order that you see them on your handout, they're ordered first by their unweighted score, and where 2 projects have the same unweighted score, the project then that has the higher weighted score is rated higher, or a higher priority than the other project. So that's basically why we do the weighting. It's a way of breaking a tie and just showing which of a group of projects might be the one to pursue first. So the idea here is that these priorities are used for planning and budgeting purposes, but they're not fixed in stone. We are going to update them on an ongoing basis, and as I noted earlier in the presentation, this is actually now the 5th update of the plan in the past 10 years. So every couple of years or so, these priorities will be updated. New projects will be added, old ones will be removed, and if conditions have changed, some projects might go up or down in terms of their rating and their priorities. That doesn't mean that the town has to work through the projects in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 order, but the idea is to work on that top group of projects. Those are the priorities to pursue as opposed to the ones that are further down or near the bottom of the list. So that's a quick summary of the age-friendly transportation plan, the preliminary projects that we're proposing to be added to the plan, and the preliminary priorities. So what we're looking for is your feedback. We'll have some questions right now, but also you can give us feedback via email. Ideally, you provide your feedback by the end of this month. And what I will do is I will update the list of priority projects and add any new ones that might have been identified as necessary. And I will present the final age-friendly transportation plan to Council in January next year. So thank you very much for following me through this presentation. I'd be happy to take questions and talk about the proposed projects or anything else related to the age-friendly plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. I turn it over to our facilitator, Director of Engineering, Mr. Weir.
Thank you, Mayor Westbrook. I personally don't have anything to add, just to take us into the next phase of the meeting, which might be any questions of council to Richard, following which we can entertain questions from the assembled members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, questions from council? Councillor Harrison.
So just a couple. So as mentioned that, so we I think it was in April or May or so of this year, we passed a resolution to reach out to the province and the federal government to discuss the whole active rail line at First and Memorial. Did we receive a response from that communication? I know it sounds like the response has been, yep, it's still an active rail line, but I'm just curious about that.
No, nothing in response to our correspondence. I think we've watched with interest the developments with local First Nations and the land that the railway occupies through their territory. So I think the province has been very reluctant to tackle this, but I think they will be required to face it now. And I think they've put aside some funds to study the corridor, hopefully in conjunction with First Nations, and to identify opportunities along the line. Certainly it's been identified that it might be much more advantageous to be some manner of pathway as opposed to a functioning railway, but that is still to develop.
Thank you very much. So I look forward to the results of what I believe will be the 4th provincial study on the rail line. So just to highlight too, the reason that I raise that is that I mean, I can reach out to, I can send you guys an email, but it was specifically because the court ruling that allowed Snanas to get their land back in March of this year, the justice specifically said a line about just because you call it a railway doesn't mean it's actually an active railway. So I think it might be helpful when we're reaching out to the province and the feds, and this is what a judge has said. We're not a judge, but you know, just can you clarify this? The other thing too, there's just a couple little minor quibbles about a score, like 1 point one way or the other. So at the last open house, and certainly through the accessibility team, some of the in-person meetings we had, I'm thinking particularly of the meeting at Berwick, when we're talking about Memorial and First, a lot of folks mentioned that crosswalk is a little bit difficult if you have a walker. It's very busy. You have people coming out of the gas station who are very impatient to get somewhere. And if you're making that left-hand turn down towards the water, you might be waiting there a long time and you see a window and you go. So it's just because right now as vulnerable users 3, I mean, maybe a 4, but I still understand why we're deferring it anyways. And then also to the discussion of the school, I think that's great that we're looking at that. The only thing I'd add to is I know sometimes when I was living in Eagle Crest for a while, I drive along Village Way and you see all the kids doing PE, like running along Village Way. So you could have a lot of young kids along that road taking up a bit of space. So if anything, in terms again of some of those numbers, like 1 or 2 more, but it's so high, that's fine. Last question would be, I know when I look at ICBC data, I sometimes separate things out by the number of what are called, well, they call it casualties, but basically injuries. And I was wondering when we're doing our analysis, you mentioned, for example, at the Village Way Country Club roundabout, there's a discussion of crash data. Do we separate that out from just motor vehicle incidents, or do we look at injuries separately?
Well, I think we look at both categories, and the interesting thing about the intersection at Village Way and 19A is it may have been a high crash site, but when you really drilled down into the data, you really found that they were rear-end collisions where somebody was not anticipating the person in front of them to actually stop at a stop sign, and they ran into them because they're doing a shoulder check to see what's coming down the highway. So the stats showed that it was a high crash site, but there was not a lot of injury. Actually, the intersection at Qualicum Road and Village Way was a much higher casualty site. So I think Richard and certainly ourselves, we drill right down into the data to see what it tells us so that we're not misled by just numerical stats.
Thank you very much, Mr. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Anyone else from council? There was one, go ahead. I'll come after.
I'm just wondering, from the consultant, you talked about narrower traffic lanes are a pretty efficient way of slowing down traffic. And in terms of First Avenue by the playground, have you considered, or would you look at bulges so that they can both hopefully slow down the traffic and perhaps also have some plantings in them?
Is that a question to our consultant or to Mr. Weir?
To the consultant.
Did you hear the question, Richard?
Yes, I did. So the question was about narrower traffic lanes, and would that be an appropriate thing to do on First Avenue? Was that the question?
That's right.
Well, actually,
Yeah, so I think I wouldn't say that narrower traffic lanes on their own are, they do discourage speeding. What we've got on First Avenue is a situation where there's a reduced speed zone in the middle of the road, so it really is an appropriate place to be putting something at either end of the zone. So what I've suggested is a raised crosswalk and a speed table, which are, in terms of profile, almost the same thing at either end of the zone, just to get people to slow down coming into that zone. We can see what the effect of that is, and if there's more to be done, then we could look at doing something else on First Avenue. There may be some curb extensions or other features, median islands or something else, similar to the types of things we talked about on Highway 19A that could be done on First Avenue. But I would suggest that's a bit of an incremental approach would be the best way to go. First, let's see what the raised crosswalk and the speed table does, because my experience elsewhere is that actually can do a lot with a reduced speed zone, like a playground zone. It kind of wakes people up and makes them realize, oh yeah. And so that might be sufficient all on its own, or we may have to follow up and do a bit more.
okay, I was just wondering, you mentioned that on Crescent, between Memorial and the highway, essentially, where it comes back down to the highway, that there are speed tables there, but that traffic hadn't necessarily slowed down very much. So I'm just wondering if that is an effective alternative.
Well, yes, speed tables are. The issue on Crescent is they're spaced quite far apart. They're about 600 meters apart, which is more than twice what we'd want. And we did them, again, the reason for putting them was primarily just to deal with any potential impacts associated with traffic that was diverted around the roundabout project. So it's not the optimum spacing there. The spacing I'm proposing between the two devices on First Avenue is much closer together. It's an appropriate spacing, and it suits the 40-kilometer-an-hour zone. That's the other difference, is there's a reason that people are being asked to slow down on First, and they'll understand that, whereas Crescent, it's just the default speed limit the whole way through. So there, we just need to put a few more devices in to just decrease the spacing between them so that they're spaced at an effective distance apart, and again, see what the effects of those are in terms of speeds before we consider whether we need to do anything else on Crescent. I think 2 more speed tables and a raised crosswalk I would hope would be sufficient to get speeds to a manageable level, but we'll see.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Skipsey.
I don't want to take up too much of the time because I want the gallery to have their chance, but in the example where the medians that on Bowen Road in Nanaimo was displayed, I'm wondering about whether something like that could be used to have like the through traffic on one side of the medians and then parking separated on the other side down at the waterfront.
Sorry, Richard, did you hear that
Yeah,
question?
I'm just thinking, maybe I'm not quite understanding it. The medians that you saw in the Bowen Road example were because there's left turn lanes in the center of the road. So where there's a left turn lane, it's a left turn lane. But in between the left turn lanes, you don't need the lane, so a median was put in there. Now, I'm proposing medians at several locations along the waterfront just as a traffic calming feature in the center of the road, breaks the road up visually. It really emphasizes the narrower lanes, a more constrained environment. The parking is still on the outside of the road, though. The median islands are in the center of the road, but it does give us the opportunity with the narrower lanes and some other features to start looking at adding more parking bays along the highway.
Okay, thanks, Richard. I have one myself, and that is along Laburnum Road, and it's on the just above where we start the green completed projects, and it talks about near the top, Laburnum Road and railway tracks, where people from that new subdivision of Claymore Landing, there's an kind of an entrance and an exit for pedestrian and people on bicycles to connect across the Laburnum Road to the pathways. So I don't see, it's mentioned there, but I don't see on the map how that would be resolved. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'll have to get you to describe that again. I didn't quite catch everything you said.
Okay, it's on Laburnum Road, right by the railway tracks. And then there is a trail that goes just across from there all the way into town. But from the subdivision of Claymore Landing, there's no safe crossing from that area to the track, to the pathways.
Boy, I hate to. Where exactly are we talking about again?
So the mayor's just come over to sort of point it out, but I think it's one, Richard, that you sort of mentioned that the map was getting a little cluttered and you didn't actually show every project that's in the project list on the map. But I think it's at the end of the Hoylake Road Trail, a connection across to the new subdivision that's on the west side of Laburnum.
Sorry, yes, I know what we're talking about. Yeah, so where the Hoylake Road Trail comes out on Laburnum Road, it would be, just on the south side of the railway track, getting into the new subdivision that's on the west side of Laburnum Road there. That's what we're talking about, right?
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah, the issue there with that crossing, I had a look at it. The sight distance is coming up Laburnum Road from the north, so you're coming up the hill from Highway 19A, are really bad. They're quite limited. So to put a crossing in there, it's not a great location for a crossing. I think maybe if the rail, we're dealing with the active rail line, so we can't be within 30 meters of the thing. If the status of that rail line changes, then I think there's an opportunity to look at doing something in that location. Otherwise, the only way to get across there is to ask people to come down to Claymore Road, where we have a flashing signal that I've identified as being upgraded to RRFBs. But that's really, at that point, the only safe location we can provide a crossing. Again, we're constrained by the rules around the railway crossing.
No, and I understand that, Richard. What about slowing traffic down? What solutions do you have? Because the traffic is pretty speedy, and the letter I got from the people who live there is that often they're parents who drive the kids to school at the Qualicum Beach Elementary, and I guess they're running a bit behind schedule, so they go at a high speed, and I wonder what we could do to slow everybody down.
good question. That's not something we specifically looked at, and it wasn't something, the speeds along there, the pedestrian access, what we just talked about, was the issue that was flagged along there. So I don't have a clear answer for you today. I think that's something I'll have a look at, and maybe we can add something to the age-friendly plan to deal with speeding in that area. The one option, of course, is to deploy the mobile speed reader device out there on a regular basis, but there may be some more we can do. I just don't have an answer for you right now on that.
That's fine, Richard. Just keep it under consideration. Thank you. So now is the turn, I think, for one more point. Go ahead.
Sorry, just two really fast things. One, just to confirm that when we're talking about the Island Highway along from Judges Road to Crescent, we did have the conversation earlier about how first responders use that, so I just want to double check with staff that was one of the lenses we used when we were discussing all this. I'm sure it was. Just want to double check that.
Absolutely, and it's why we're saying there's no vertical deflections on a major arterial like that for those reasons.
Okay. And just a second point that was raised at the open house recently, a citizen had actually a really interesting idea. They compared it to the Village Way Country Club 19A intersection where we couldn't afford the roundabout, so we did some improvements, which made it a little bit better. And just to refer that back to the Memorial and First, we're going to have all the folks in East Village moving in soon. There's going to be a little bit busier. And is there maybe like if the province keeps saying, or the federal government keeps saying it's an active rail line, you can't do anything, is there like a modest version we could do that might improve things?
Well, I'll discuss it with Richard, but I think it's difficult because the geometry of what was going on at Village Way and 19A was different, and people were choosing to sort of turn it into like the pork chop right slip kind of lane configuration, which it was not. And we were able to correct that with additional barriers in the center median. And we have seen the crash stats go way down since that, fairly low cost improvement was made. I don't really, we'll look at it, but I don't think there's as simple a fix at that location. It really needs, it is the lowest level of service intersection in town, and especially at rush minute around 3 o'clock. So it really needs to be a signalized intersection, but we just can't do it.
Yeah. So now up to the folks who've been waiting patiently. If you come up to the microphone, Mr. Drull can hear you if you have a question to our consultant. So who'd like to go first? There's a lady coming up behind you, so you're going to have to wait. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, you didn't see her coming. That's all right. Over here, over this microphone. And just state your name. You don't have to state your address.
My name is Diane Anderson.
Speaking to the phone. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the mic needs to be over the phone still.
I need a lot of direction.
Yeah. Well, it was like this, I think. That was how it's supposed to work. So go ahead.
My name is Diane Anderson,
Just speak to the microphone.
and I live in Eagle Crest.
Yeah, you're speaking to the consultant. So
Okay. We bought our house in 2001. We live just off Fairway Drive. To get onto Highway 19, to turn towards Parksville, it's a left turn. We have been told since 2001 that there will eventually be a roundabout. Well, it is now 2023, and nothing has happened. I've sat there and counted 29 cars. I also sit there and look at all the people coming down Village Way that don't believe there is a stop sign when they turn right on Highway 19. So in order to make a really safe left-hand turn, we go down Country Club, along Eagle Crest, continue on to Johnson, go up, wasting our time. I guess one of my questions is, why can't we have a four-way stop or stoplights? I guess that's my whole question. And since it's in a priority 5, we've heard constantly about there's not enough money. Somewhere along the line, there's going to be more accidents, and maybe they won't be fender benders, but it's a very unsafe intersection. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll let Mr. DeDruel answer first, and then I'll turn it back to Mr. Weir.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. I agree. It's been in the age-friendly plan since originally it was adopted in 2013, and it's something the town wants to do. Like, there's no question. But as I noted, this is a very expensive project, so it's one that will require cost-share funding. The town's finances just aren't enough to allow it to go alone on that. You could put a traffic signal in there instead, but a traffic signal is not necessarily going to make the intersection safer, especially for pedestrians and cyclists. There's a lot of issues on highways or on higher speed roads like that section of 19A with traffic signals and collisions. So the best overall solution, and one that also provides a traffic calming benefit for that stretch of the highway, is the roundabout. That's why it's identified as the preferred option there. Back in the original age-friendly transportation plan, we did look at a traffic signal. We used the same criteria to prioritize it, to rank it, and a traffic signal rated much, much lower than a roundabout. So we've kept the roundabout in the plan, saying that's the preferred solution for that intersection. It gives us all the safety benefits and more that we'd get with a traffic signal, and it gives us the traffic calming benefits that in addition.
Mr. Weir? So it's just a matter of us having the funds to do it. We did the one on Memorial and Rupert Road, and that's probably now 10 years ago. When we first thought about a roundabout, all of a sudden I had a lot of different names that people gave me, and it wasn't your worship, because they did not like the idea of a roundabout. And they said, you're going to have to tear it up, and it's not going to work, and it's just a waste of money. So afterwards, because I was convinced by our engineer who had videos from other areas where they put one in, it was going to work. So then the one at Memorial and Island Highway came up, and we had a grant for it, so we did that one. And this one would be next. But we're working our way through it, but these are high-end and expensive projects, but it is the right solution. At first, we've had a lot of people that didn't know how to use them, but I think more and more people are getting used to it, and I think it definitely is a safer way to make an intersection. As a matter of fact, the province has indicated that if you're going to change the intersection, you should first consider a roundabout. So hopefully, with the elections coming up for both provincial and next year federal, maybe we'll have a chance to get some money for this project. But I'm with you. It's been on my list, and we have the engineering basically done. So to get this project in the hopper. Thank you. Who's next? This gentleman here. Come on up. No, you. You were going to stand up, so I kept you on the list.
Thank you. My name's Tim Benish, and it's very difficult speaking away from it. Yeah. I don't know if I want to do that. I submitted a document to the committee just outlining some of the issues and recommendations that myself and a number of other cyclists I ride with on a regular basis have in the community in regard to cycling. So what I've heard is encouraging, because some of them have been or looked at being addressed. The signage for one, and the other one being the markings of some of the trails and continuing with the trails. One of the things I didn't hear, though, and one of the things I put in my document, it was actually on one of the slides, was dividing at least putting a line down the trails, the paved trails, so people have an understanding of which way is left and which way is right, so that it makes it a little bit easier for cyclists and pedestrians. The other one is basically more to do, or the other ones are to do with the rail line. And there's a number of different issues and problems that result in safety hazards, and I heard some of them tonight in Richard's presentation. To me, I don't think it makes sense to wait another 5 years. I think in the 2019 plan, there was all these things that I put in my document. They're still there. They haven't been addressed. I don't know if we want to wait another 5 years to hear a decision. I just kind of question the fact that we just wait for the BC government to come back and tell us what's going to happen. I'm sure there's a lot of other municipalities and cities, towns along that railway who want to know what to do. To me, we've got the East Village that's going to be adding more people crossing that intersection. I'm talking about Memorial and First. You've got the Kiwanis project as well. And if we don't address that, it's just going to be horrendous in that particular intersection. The other one, bad one, is by the museum. If you come off the new trail, the traffic coming down beach to the waterfront, there's no stop sign where that trail comes out. So if you're new to the community, you're thinking that the cars are going to stop. Well, they don't have to stop till they get to the railroad tracks. So again, it's a safety issue. I think some of these things can be handled maybe different ways, but at the end of the day, I think the decision, something has to be done with that railroad, and maybe it's a matter of taking matters into the town's own hands and saying, well, we're going to go ahead with some of these things, and you know, maybe other municipalities and towns will follow suit, so we can enforce the issue. The last thing, I just have a question to Richard, and I think Councillor Harrison answered part of it. I was wondering why the raised crosswalks weren't used on 19A. And I think I heard that because of the emergency vehicles that had to access that. I guess my question is, what's the difference between that and Crescent? Don't emergency vehicles have to go that way as well? So that's one question. The other question is, are we encouraging traffic to use the Laburnum bypass instead of going down along 19A? So. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benesh. Those are some very good questions. I'll give Richard the first crack at it, and then Mr. Weir.
Okay, yep, thank you, Tim. I do have a copy of your letter that you sent a few days ago regarding the cycling stuff, and as you noted, a lot of the things that you've asked for in here are either in the plan already or are dependent upon the railway. To get to your question about 19A and the speed tables, 19A, Highway 19A is an arterial road, and speed tables, speed humps can't be used on arterial roads. So that's the key limitation there. The other arterial roads in town, just as a matter of interest, are Memorial, Village Way, and then of course the Ring Road, Laburnum and Rupert and Bennett. So those ones we look at doing other things to discourage speeding along the highway, but on roads like Crescent and First, because they are collector roads, we can use the speed tables there. So it's about emergency access, but that's not the only thing. It's just consistent with the classification of the road, the function, the volume of traffic, the size of the large vehicles that are using it, and some other factors that preclude us from using speed tables on arterial roads.
Thank you, Richard. I'll turn it over to Mr. Weir.
Yeah, I think my comments would just be addressing his last comment about are you trying to encourage people to use the Ring Road as opposed to use 19A? Well, 19A historically was a highway. It's been downgraded to us, and we're now trying to repurpose it more as our own road as opposed to the highway. It is one of the reasons we built the Ring Road is as an arterial to divert traffic that doesn't need to come through our community. One important consideration there is if you build that road, it's intended to move traffic. So you don't want to do things to it to discourage people from taking it. So you have to weigh the safety and benefits of trying to slow traffic or discourage people from using it, then did we build it to move traffic around our community in the first place? So it's a bit of a balancing act, but certainly we look at all aspects of it.
Thank you. Who's next? Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Well, just to that, when you're approaching the town heading east, and just before Laburnum, it actually says Parksville go straight, and then Nanaimo go right. So I don't know if we want to look at that signage that would encourage people to use the Ring Road rather than the beachfront.
Very good point, Ms. Councillor Skipsey. That has been mentioned before. Mr. Weir?
Yes, we can look at it, but we have to do it in conjunction with the province, because the province actually dictated what our signage was going to be to direct people onto numbered highways. So all of the signs that you see at the edge of town and at the roundabout were really their decisions, although we can always go back and argue the decisions with them again. So I will certainly put that down as something to address.
So they got it both ways. They downloaded the road to us, and they control the signs to make it inconvenient.
That's the way it goes.
Kevin, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Monahan, and I have a couple of issues. First of all, regarding the railway line. So this is going to be a big issue, I'm sure, tonight. But especially with regards to Beach Avenue and Qualicum Road, and peripherally at Memorial as well, where First and Memorial come together. We have this issue that was well described by Richard here, where you have people coming down the hill where it's on Beach, where there's no stop sign. You've got people coming up the hill where the stop sign is at the railway line and not at First Avenue or Mill. Yeah, it's Mill there. And in my experience driving around this town, walking around this town, I can speak to the areas that I know best, and this is one area that I know best. And it is one of the places where I, both as a pedestrian and as a driver, feel most vulnerable. And so it is, in my mind, not acceptable to go for the status quo in these locations. First and Memorial, same thing. Not acceptable. As a driver, it's a problem, and it's just going to get worse. So what is the option here? I mean, okay, we've got big, expensive plans that we would like to bring forward, but couldn't we simply convert those all into four-way stops, or at least Qualicum Road, a three-way stop? And then, so what if there's a stop sign by the railway line? You've got a four-way stop, everybody stops before they proceed into the intersection. It would really, really simplify things. And having said that, four-way stops could be used in other places. And one other place that, for me, is another location that provides a lot of insecurity is at Crescent Road and Memorial. A lot of the time, I don't want to try turning left when I come from the tree streets where I live. I don't want to turn left on Memorial, so I go to Beach, I turn left on Beach, I go down to Crescent, and then I'm trying to turn left onto Memorial to go down to the roundabout. What would the number of golfers crossing at the pedestrian crossing, and then people coming down the hill or up the hill, sometimes you have to wait quite a long time before you can make a turn there. And I think a four-way stop there would be useful too. I think a four-way stop there would also help to slow traffic, and with a benefit further uphill where you've got, as Richard suggested, there are some problems there at the railway. And if we have to put a stop sign in within 30 feet of the railway, I think rather than subject our citizens to further risk, I think we simply say to the province, we're going to do this, and if you don't like it, you remove it. Because right now, for that railway line to be used again, to be active again, there's going to be millions and millions of dollars that need to be spent. I've walked on that railway line a lot. The ties are in terrible condition. There's no way you could run a railway on there now. And that's the thing that everybody knows, so they don't pay attention to the stop signs. And the big deal about stop signs and drivers is that every driver has the right You've got the responsibility to follow the traffic rules, but you've also got the right to expect other people to follow those rules. And we have a situation in town where we have these stop signs at the railway line where there's large numbers of people that simply ignore them. And it places other people in a question of what's going to happen here. So that's my very, very strong recommendation, that we just seize the day and do the job. Stop signs can't be that expensive. And in fact, if you look at the roundabout at Village Way in 19A, again, yes, it may be years before we can get the money to do something about that, but a simple, small investment in 4 stop signs would significantly increase safety for people coming out of Country Club and significantly ease the burden on people living in Eagle Crest. So I have a couple of other issues, but I'm going to leave them, let other people have something to say. So thank you.
Thank you. You can sit right there. So I'll turn it over to Richard first,
Okay.
and then Mr. Weir.
Oh, sorry. Is it time? Did you want time for me to respond?
Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
Okay, so
That was
some good
Kevin.
comments. I'll preface it by saying stop signs are generally solve more problems, or create more problems than they solve. I've done traffic calming all across BC and Alberta, and I have to say, right near the top of the list of problems are all-way stops. 4-way stops generally, they cause problems for the same sort of reasons you just talked about. People won't stop at the stop signs at the railway tracks. That's what starts happening with 4-way stops. Also, the highway just has too much traffic. You can't make a 4-way stop work in those circumstances. So what we want to do at the crossing, for instance, where you're talking about a beach road and mill there, we'd like to put a crossing, and we've now built a trail that comes out from Harlech and gets you to Beach Road. We want to continue the trail along Harlech, east of Beach, to connect over to Memorial, and we would put a crossing in there with stop signs or some other form of control or something. I don't know the details yet because we can't do anything. That's the problem with the rail line. So unfortunately, I appreciate your frustration. I think everyone feels the same level of frustration. So that's what's constraining us there. We can maybe still do the pathway, but we'll have to put some sort of, we'll have to just leave the crossing unmarked if we were to complete the pathway there. Just wanted to pick up on your comment about West Crescent and the Island Highway. We've identified that as one of the operational issues. It's not in the age-friendly plan, but it is an issue to improve the sight distances at that intersection. As you noted, right now to come out Crescent onto the Island Highway there is a bit dicey. You can't see very well at all. To the east, there's some encroachment into the right-of-way and some obstruction of sight lines. So that's been identified as an operational issue to be undertaken. So as I was talking, it doesn't have to be part of the age-friendly plan. It's something that town can just go ahead with and do right now or in the near future.
Thank you. Mr. Weir, any comments on that question?
I just want to go back to the 4-way stops as trying to do a solution on things like Memorial and the Crescent or highway intersections, where you have an imbalance in traffic in the two directions, especially like, say, Memorial and the Crescent. They're not appropriate, and we'd call it as unwarranted, and they actually increase the incidence of T-bone intersection crashes than they do sort of improve safety. The kind of accidents we had at Rupert Road before the roundabout. I've tried to argue with council before when we were looking at 4-way stops at the Crescent, saying that they're not appropriate there, and certainly anywhere you have that kind of traffic. If people don't think they should be stopping or it's warranted, they don't respect it. It's in a smaller way, it's like the 4-way stops that we've got, say, on Primrose and Beach. They're not really respected by people. I mean, it was us trying to slow the traffic that was trying to avoid the light at Memorial and Fern. But I really, and I think Rob just sent me a little note as well. He's had lots of experience with 4-way stops in, he just had to step out. 4-way stops in Alberta, and he feels the same way. If they're not warranted, don't put them in. They're dangerous.
See, what happened when we were working on the roundabout, we did have a four-way stop there on a temporary, I think it was temporary. It was intended to be temporary, but people felt much more comfortable and confident that it was a safer intersection during that period. And so some people remember that and go, why didn't we just keep it that way?
But at that time, the balance of traffic on the two legs was near to equal, which is when it will work. And if there's a great imbalance, then it won't.
Right. Kevin Monahan said that he would come back after somebody else had some questions and had some comments. So who's next? Yes, ma'am. Come on up.
Yeah, I wanted to address the
State
stretch
your
of
name.
road. Oh, sorry, my name is Sue Willis, and I live on Rupert Road East. And I'm feeling nervous, but I'm going to do this. So, okay, so I'm addressing Rupert Road East to Qualicum Road. And I know we've been talking about it, it's a bypass road, but nonetheless, the speed limit's 70 kilometers an hour. And so I've driven around lots. We've been living here 3 years now, and I've looked at other areas where there's 70-kilometer-hour speed limits, and there's not a lot. And I know we're a bypass road, but the difference between our road and other roads that are 70 kilometers an hour are ours has lots of driveways. There's 21 homes along the stretch I'm talking about that have driveways coming out. It makes it a lot more dangerous than, say, going along the highway or Village or like into Parksville. So, yeah, and it also, that stretch of road of Rupert joins up with the path. There's like a pedestrian path that starts at Qualicum and goes all the way to the roundabout. So a lot of people from behind, like say View Road, down Rupert Road, come and join up with that path. But there's that stretch, they have to walk right alongside Rupert Road. And I've stood there many times and looked at who goes along it just to make sure it's not just me and my kids walking our dogs and riding our bikes. There's a lot of jogging clubs, cycling clubs, rollerbladers, skate skiers, people walking to the bus stop, kids walking home from school. My daughter walks home from school and she's always scared along that stretch of road. And then I looked at the statistics that were handed out, and for speed, I mean, I know it was only done for 18 days in April when I looked at it. I look at it every day. The 85th percentile, people are going up to 21 kilometers over the speed limit. That was just the 18-day stretch showed. Oh my goodness, I'm riding my horse on my property, and so many times I've nearly been bucked off because people, I call them hot rods. They're not hot rods, but they're driving them like burning the tires. It's like they're drag racing. But they're not racing against anyone. And I'm just wondering too, with the development at Pheasant Glen, which will be Qualicum and Rupert, there's going to be a lot more traffic coming down there. So I'm just looking to the future. And I timed it, because I would love to see the speed limit put down to, say, 50 kilometers an hour. Driving that stretch from 50 all the way to the roundabout, compared to 70, you save 58 seconds. Like, it wouldn't make a huge difference for people's day to just slow down, even if they just slowed down Rupert to Qualicum until people can get to the pedestrian walkway. So the criteria that was laid out for roads being looked at was safety got a ×2, the use for present and future, and I mentioned Pheasant Glen and present use. Vulnerable users, lots of vulnerable users. I wasn't sure what network contribution was, and cost, I'm not sure what we could do about it, the costs, and then other factors. So, but I felt that our road, Rupert Road East, fit a lot of those criteria. Since June, I've written 5 emails to the town about it, to the address, or the email address that was up there saying about this presentation, if you had any concerns. I haven't received a response from anyone except Councillor Harrison. Twice, he was very good. He said that there was a consultant looking in it, and he was asking them to reply to me. No one ever replied to me about that. So, yeah, I really worry about it. I was also thinking of a four-way stop at Qualicum and Rupert, but I just listened to what you guys have been talking about, so might not be the best solution. But anyways, I would really like it addressed, because I feel that safety of all those people and their dogs and their bikes and everything is at risk. And I know there was an accident on the other side of Memorial, and that's why they raised it to 50, and I would just hate to see somebody get injured. That's my comment.
Thank you. Richard, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. I do have a copy of one of your emails, and so it was forwarded to me from the town with your concerns about that stretch of Rupert. I think your comment, especially about the need for pedestrian facilities along there, I appreciate that. I understand that, yes, the pathway currently ends at Qualicum and doesn't continue. It would be nice for that to continue along Rupert and eventually connect up with the proposed pathway along Bennett Road to make more of a ring road connection for the pathway and tie in with the dog park. So in particular, I think the challenge in terms of speeds is that Rupert is a straight flat road. So it's again this road that is built to accommodate higher speeds. It's signed at 70, which is appropriate given the design of the road. What we want to do is make sure that we keep people to that range of speeds. And as you noted, the speeds are higher out there. One of the things that's been identified is that area for sort of ongoing rotate and deployment of the mobile speed sign. There may be some other things we can do, but I don't have a specific answer for you today. But I'll discuss that with staff, and we'll see if there's something else that we can look at doing in that area of Rupert.
Thank you, Richard. Anything to add to that, Mr. Beer? Okay. Who's next? Yes, come on up, Todd.
Hi, Todd Provo. I'm a resident of Qualicum Beach and president of the Qualicum Woods Residents Association. Firstly, I'd like to thank council and staff for having this meeting this evening, and I'd like to thank Richard for his presentation. There's a lot of good information that really assists us to understand how the age-friendly transportation plan review is going, so thank you for that. Also like to thank Richard for the updates he provided on the improvements of the speed feedback sign and the crosswalk on 19A at Hemsworth and the resultant 30% reduction in speed there. So thank you to council for supporting that improvement and staff for implementing it. We really appreciate it. That was a lot of community feedback and concerns for those areas, so thank you. I'd also like to say thank you as well, Richard, for highlighting some of the upcoming projects, such as the crossings at Hall Road, Qualicum, the signalized pedestrian at Milner as well. We've been advocating for traffic calming along 19A between Village Way and Hall Road for quite some time. We've gotten a lot of feedback from community members that since the crosswalk's been implemented, there's concern about that section of the road. As Mr. Weir identified in the past, there's no friction on that road to encourage drivers to slow down. And with the crosswalk there now at Hemsworth, a lot of people are saying there's a false sense of security. And because it's, down a hill and around a corner, when people aren't slowing down from 70 to 50, it really would be helpful to have some traffic calming. So thank you so much for that traffic calming that you've indicated is in the plan. I sent some correspondence ahead of the meeting, and Richard, I hope you have it, and council, I know you've seen it, or some of you have seen it. We've been getting a lot of feedback that speeding and its impact upon the community in terms of injuries, potential fatalities, feelings of safety and well-being and comfort as pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers on our roadways would really be improved with a reduction in residential speeds. A lot of jurisdictions and municipalities, both locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally, have adopted lower residential speeds recently. There's a lot of research and information available that we've seen. A number of times we've seen London, England referenced, and they've studied since they made the changes, the impact, and they're down to 32 kilometers an hour because of the miles per hour they use, but it's the equivalent of 32 kilometers an hour. They've seen a 40% decrease in injuries. We also noticed some literature from Edinburgh and parts of Wales. They've indicated they've had close to a 40% reduction in serious injuries and fatalities. We saw that the UBCM in 2019 endorsed a motion from Vancouver to make the default speed for streets without a center line to be 30. It's motion B7 that year. We've also seen that there's an increase in the popular support for lowering speeds in residential areas, up to about 66% on one study we saw. And one of the things that we saw that we found really powerful was a stat from the BC government that talks about the efficacy of speed reduction. And they talk about that when a pedestrian is struck by a car traveling at 50 kilometers or higher, they have an 80% chance of being killed. However, when the speed is reduced to 30 kilometers an hour, the chance of survival increases to 20%, from 20% to 90% chance of survival. So we found that really powerful to see that information there. So all of that leads us to ask Council to support the reduction of residential speeds as soon as possible, and that it be included in the age transportation plan review. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Mr. Richard, any comment on the suggestion that the fallback speed in the residential areas would be 40 instead of 50? I've heard that so many times that seems like in other areas it's working. At one time when we were building the school at Laburnum, the whole area of Canyon Crescent was reduced to 40. There's only two ways to get in there, one from Hoylake and one from Garrett. We turned it down to 40, and nobody seems to complain about it. The people had to go slow. So I'm not sure, well, I know that another council afterward didn't want that, but I didn't see anything wrong with it. So in general, what's the reason for not slowing down people in residential streets? Where are you going to go? Why would you have to go fast? Doesn't make sense. So personally, I like the idea, but I'd like to hear the comments from our consultant and the engineer.
Yes, I like the idea of a lower speed limit as default. The problem is, and I've looked into this for other communities, so I'll tell you what I basically recommended to them. The problem is that the Motor Vehicle Act today would require you to post every street and every block of every street in both directions with signs indicating what the speed limit is. So in Vancouver, they did a pilot project in just a small neighborhood. There was a total of 3.3 kilometers of streets, so not a lot, a very small neighborhood. They needed 120 signs, and it cost them $10,000 a kilometer, a total of $33,000. They did a pilot project in Winnipeg, same problem there with their Motor Vehicle Act. They had to put, again, a small neighborhood, 4 streets. They had to put in 224 signs, and it cost them $83,000, $8,000 a kilometer to basically reduce the speed limit. So it doesn't take, you look at Qualicum Beach, you'd be up to over $1 million in no time, and you wouldn't be done. So it really is a bureaucratic obstacle that we face. And so what my recommendation has been for other communities where I've looked into this is that you're far better to spend your money on other things that will actually help deal with safety problems in town than to spend it putting up a whole bunch of signs that maybe in just a couple of years you won't need anymore. The province is reviewing the Motor Vehicle Act. When they do come up with an updated Motor Vehicle Act, it's expected that there will be some change in this regard that doesn't then require you to have all these signs, that you can have a lower speed limit without that. In the meantime, spend the money on the things that are priorities in the age-friendly transportation plan, and leave the default speed limit the way it is, and wait for the province to do their thing.
Thank you, Richard. I see our engineer nodding, and so I guess you agree with that.
Yes, I would agree with that. And the only thing I would add is that signing a street doesn't guarantee you any kind of compliance by the public. If people don't want to travel 40 and you've signed at 40, they're going to go what speed they feel the road is. Richard is suggesting that you adopt other measures, like on First Avenue. If there's near the playground, if you want it to be 40, then do something else to make the people slow down to that speed. We put the speed on Memorial for a section of it down to 40, and it didn't really have an effect, and in the end we removed it and turned it back to 50. So we always caution that just putting up signage isn't necessarily going to give you a result, and like in this case, if you want to do it municipality-wide, I think we wait for the province to give us that opportunity.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Just one point additionally to that discussion is the province did have a pilot project for a default 40-kilometer residential speed. I think 6 communities or so. I know it was one of the Saanages. There are technically 3 Saanages in Victoria, so I'm always confused which one, forgive me. But one of the Saanages and a few other communities tried it. There was a window where you could apply, because we discussed lower speed in Chartwell in the previous term, but we missed that window. But it is something that I think had a start and end date, so it might be something that there might be some public information from the province about the outcomes from that. And you are right about the fatality likelihood. There's a really sharp S-curve. I remember looking up World Health Organization data when I first ran, and yeah, there's even between 40 and 50, there's a huge difference in the number of fatalities.
Thank you. And the irony is, it doesn't take all that much longer. I've gone with previous councils when we were on Speedwatch from Memorial to West Crescent at 50 and then went to 40. It took exactly 1 minute longer. And what a beautiful scenic drive. Like, I just don't get it. When I'm on the highway to Nanaimo, I go to speed limit. But along our foreshore and areas through the golf courses, it's so beautiful. Why would you, what's the rush? Anyway, Doug, come on up.
Well, thank you, Worship. My name is Doug McKayden, and I am the president of the Qualicum Beach Resident Association. I want to echo what Todd has just said about the presentation. I thought it was excellent. Richard did a very, very good job. And comments from staff, and I was impressed. I really was. Now, our association surveyed our members about their concerns about traffic safety. Number 1 on the list, of course, is traffic speed. And I've just been down in Victoria, and there's other communities that actually have 40 kilometers an hour. It's still a place where the signs are still there. In terms of signage and speed limits, I am concerned about our beach, especially in the area of St. Andrew's Lodge. We're spending a lot of money. We've acquired the property. We're putting in new parking. And the cars are going through there like they're in a drag race. And I'm concerned as we're inviting more and more people as tourists that come to our community, and that is just an accident waiting to happen, because somebody's going to come across the street and get hit. So there are things that we can do. We can start by setting the speed limit, reducing it to 40 kilometers an hour, at least in that area. And that wouldn't cost a lot of money. The other thing was, of course, the street crossing comments. Again, First and Memorial is top of the list, their concerns. Cycling comments. A major issue for many respondents was the separation of pedestrians and cyclists. Many noted the danger of mixing people and bikes on the trails. The whole issue of micro-mobility conveyances and their place within the transportation network need to be studied and considered as part of this plan. I'll be providing a full copy of this survey to staff, Your Worship. Sidewalk safety comments. Sidewalks in town have tripping hazards due to unevenness. Professional selection of appropriate trees with roots that do not lift up sidewalks, and I know you commented on this, would help many. Many noted that there are no sidewalks on the majority of streets in town, and this is a safety issue for all ages of pedestrians. We're short sidewalks. Parking comments. Parking is the top of the mind. People feel there's not enough parking, and they're concerned about getting parking their cars safely. There are a number of general comments that I will include in the presentation, and I won't waste the time. But there were a lot of concerns about traffic safety, bicycles, traffic speeds, and intersection crossings. Thank you, Worship.
You're welcome, Doug. Richard, any comment on that?
I did just want to comment. Thank you for your comments, and I'll look forward to receiving a copy of your materials. I just did want to pick up on the one comment about the pathways and the mixing of pedestrians and cyclists, and I did touch on that in the presentation with the mention of the trail etiquette signage. I know there was another suggestion that we should paint a line down the middle of the pathway, and this is, the lines down the middle of the pathway don't end up really doing much. We need them in certain spots where there's limited visibility, but the problem is just that we need to encourage people to safely share the path, and a line or no line isn't going to help them. That's why some extra signage out there to encourage people to behave properly. It's just a matter of everyone getting along together, learning to get along on a shared path. It can be done, and they're successful elsewhere. If we have some problems in particular locations, I've just more heard of it so far as a general comment, but if there's any specific locations where there's a higher incident of conflicts, let us know, because maybe there's a design feature there that we can deal with as well. But otherwise, the experience in other communities has shown that an ongoing program of kind of marketing, I'll call it, for trail etiquette is the best way to get people to learn and continue to safely share the pathways.
Okay, there's no further comment from our engineer. Yes, sir, come on up.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Richard. My name is Peter Starry. I live in Chartwell. So I've got three items I'd like to briefly cover. First one is particularly parochial, to do with Chartwell and Eaglecrest. The regional bus service to Woodgrove takes two different routes. There's a slightly slower route which comes along Sunrise and has a stop in Chartwell that's also reasonably accessible to Eaglecrest residents via Yambury. But when the bus takes the alternative route, which uses 19A through our area, it doesn't stop. And so my request is, my very specific request is that in addition to whatever changes are planned for the Eaglecrest Chartwell 19A intersection, include a provision of bus stops so that Eaglecrest and Chartwell are served by that bus. I know that in the westbound direction towards Qualicum, there's probably already space, because the bus drivers have kindly let me off when I've asked, especially late at night when it's been raining. They've saved me a bit of a walk, and they're happy to do it. But in the other direction, eastbound, I believe some minor work would probably need to be done to provide room for a stop. So that's one request. The second is regarding 19A along the waterfront. I'm really pleased to see the focus put on that and the future consideration of a complete street cross section. That's great news. In the meantime, however, this summer there was still a lot of people parking on the shoulders and forcing cyclists to move into the traffic lanes to get around them. So given that we may not see this complete street that's envisioned actually built until 2026, I would request that in the interim, we mark bike lanes along the shoulders on 19A. Now, bike lanes would preclude people from parking on them. I guess an alternative might be to sign the shoulders so that to preclude parking. But I think marking bike lanes is probably a better thing to do. It'll be reasonably inexpensive, and and those bike lanes can then be upgraded when the Complete Streets project comes to fruition. So that's the second point I'd like to make. Finally, I'm really happy to see the use of median islands at pedestrian crossings. I think they're wonderful. I think, however, the way that we're executing them here in Qualicum Beach doesn't take advantage of their potential function as a median refuge to allow pedestrians to cross one direction of traffic at a time and wait in the middle, for the traffic in the other direction to clear. The median refuges that I've seen are very narrow, and so they don't really provide a comfortable spot for pedestrians to wait. If we widen them out another meter or so, we would have that comfortable refuge. And so, again, that's a request that we look at wider median islands, and I think they're a wonderful amenity, and obviate the need for expensive things like pedestrian signals. So, thanks.
Thank you, and I commend you for being involved in using public transit and using your bike and walking. So you get all the friendly modes, which are very good for the environment too, and for your health. Yeah. So you've made some very good points about foreshore parking, and we've done a lot of work there. But Mr. Weir, perhaps you can give the latest update on what's happening there. Or Mr. Dickinson, who's actually our Director of Engineering. I introduced Mr. Weir as our engineer. He is retiring, but he's helping with the transition. So Mr. Dickinson, you're next.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Worship, sorry, we're not in court here.
Well, yes.
We're in the, depends on what I say here. We're in the process of actually putting up no parking signs along 19A. We've put a lot of them in place already in the portions that we haven't put dedicated parking in. And the next step that we're doing this winter is then putting in basically barriers along there. And we're just pricing and looking at options for that along that portion, so that you're not only signing it, but then actually physically preventing people from parking there, so that shoulder could be better used for cyclists and other uses as well.
Thank you. And the question regarding marking bike lanes so that people don't park there, is that an option?
We're not, because we're going to prevent vehicles from going there, we're not actually going to paint it, because we are in the process of applying for a grant to continue that dedicated shoulder with both the bike lane and the parking. So if we painted it, we potentially would then be having to remove that paint in the next 9 months or so if we're successful with that grant.
Thank you. And I'll bring it up regarding the bus stop and having a proper stop that you mentioned earlier. I'm on the Transit Select Committee, so I will bring that up with your regional district. Thank you. Who's next? Angie, come on up.
Thank you. I'm Angie Price. I support very much the idea of being able to separate cyclists and pedestrians. A friend of mine was walking along the beach in Qualicum about 16 months ago. He was hit by a cyclist. He had a badly broken arm. He was a dentist, and he is no longer a dentist. So it's a pretty tragic outcome for something that maybe could be fixed in some way. So I support anything to try and make that work a little better. And I have looked through all these papers, and I'm really impressed with the amount of things that we have tried to do to make it better. But we're missing something big. We don't have enforcement. I don't remember the last time I saw an RCMP officer pull over a speeder on 19A. They aren't there. They're just not there. And I don't know what we do as a town about it, because obviously that's not our jurisdiction, I don't think. But how do we fix that? Because that, I think, people don't pay attention because there's no penalty if they don't. That's why they don't slow down. Everybody seems to be in a hurry. And I think if they saw those lights flashing a few more times, if we could, get more patrols, it would benefit. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our staff meets on a regular basis with the RCMP. Perhaps you can comment on what's going on there, Mr. Beer.
Yes, thank you, Worship. The municipal traffic complement in the Oceanside area is really only 3 officers. They're the ones that do municipal traffic enforcement. They're required to cover Qualica Beach, the other areas, the RDN areas of Oceanside and Parksville. So they can't be here a lot, and they tend to focus their attentions where they know there are safety issues and crash problems. We request that they come and do enforcement in certain areas, but there's only so much they can do, and they tend to have to focus their efforts on the higher crash sites. We continue to try and lobby for attention in our area, but they don't see our problems as great as some of their others.
And the other thing, and I'm going to be very limited in how I am going to explain this, but there are so many other issues that have recently come up with other concerns that the RCP has to deal with, that it takes away a lot of their time when they have to bring somebody, for instance, to the hospital. They have to wait, usually 2 police officers, they have to wait until the issue is dealt with. So that has diverted a lot of their time into other areas. And for us to ask for an additional police officer, which we could do, of course there's a cost associated with that. I think just to acquire one would be about $165,000 more. And just to put it in perspective, it's $110,000 would be 1% of your taxes. So it's almost 1.5% tax increase just to have one more police officer. So hopefully they can deal with the other issues and then come back to what they're supposed to be doing with traffic in our area. Thank you. Who's next? Well, I want to thank Kevin. Yes, we said you would come back. So second round.
Thank you, Your Worship. Last time I said thank you, Your Honor, I was in court. Anyway, I would also like to add my voice to the appreciation of all the work that's gone into this. And I had many, many concerns about this, and then I see a lot of them have been dealt with. So I really do appreciate that, the work that the town staff has done and the consultant here and council. So, but I want to add my voice to the question of negative interactions between pedestrians and cyclists. Cycling is a fabulous, fabulous activity. Walking is a fabulous activity. But I have had many negative interactions with cyclists, and not just here, but in other locations too. I lived in Ottawa for many years, walking to and from work along the Rideau Canal through a paved walkway that had a line down the middle. And yes, cyclists stayed on their side of the road. Pedestrians were expected to stay to the right as well, but that meant that all the cyclists were passing you from behind, and I would refuse to do that. I wanted to see the guys that were going to hit me before they hit me. In Qualicum here, there's been quite a number of times where in my walking I've been Qualicum Beach. There have been many times where I have been almost hit from behind. And so just general cycling or general signage about sharing the road, yes, it's useful, but there is one very, very specific thing that we should really push in Qualicum Beach, and I think specialized signs for that purpose, and that is simply that cyclists, when you're passing, should ring their bells when you're passing somebody. That's all that's necessary. So there's that concern, and my final concern is that in the prior to 2019 age-friendly transportation plan, there was a link to the school connector trail plan, which was originally produced around the same time as I think it was 2012 when that was originally produced. The school connector trail plan includes a plan for a multi-use trail, which I believe means a 3-meter wide paved surface, for the museum trail from Arbutus Street to Beach Road. And we already have a good paved route along Harlech. I would like reassurance that we're not going to see a plan put forward to change the museum trail from a nice woodland trail to a 3-meter wide paved walkway. One other thing that was in the school connected trail plan, of course, was the Hoy Lake Trail. And I think, in my opinion, we now have like 3 or 4 trails side by side along that one stretch of property, which seems really excessive to me. And so I would really like some reassurance that the school connected trail plan, that there is no specific linkage from this plan to that one, and that anything be brought forward through the Age Transportation Safety Plan. So I would really appreciate that.
Thank you. I don't think there's any plans to add to the Harlech Road as far as a paved path from the school connected perspective. But and take a seat, Kevin. So this seemed like low-bearing fruit to make these kinds of multi-purpose trails safer as far as between pedestrians and cyclists. Any comment or response to that, Richard?
Yes, I agree. The museum trail, there's no plans to change that. As was noted, that we have a connection along Harlech Road, so what I call the Hoy Lake Trail from Laburnum to Arbutus, then gets you onto Harlech Road. That gets you onto a short section of trail, and it continues on to the Dolly Mount, the other side of Memorial, and then you're on Fern Road. So really, the school connector trail was from the cycling plan in 2009, so that predated the original age-friendly plan by 4 years, and that's kind of been given way now. The cycling plan has given way and been incorporated into the age-friendly plan, and what we're showing now is that continuous connection all the way from Qualicum Secondary at our Qualicum Elementary at Laburnum, all the way out to Arrowview at Bennett, and then even elsewhere as trails within the age-friendly plan, and it's not even referred to in the age-friendly plan as a school connector anymore. It won't be in this update. It's just a network of trails now that happens to pick up the schools but provides other connections, and the museum trail isn't part of that. It's staying the way it is.
Yes, and what you mentioned earlier about trail etiquettes, and now with this concern about cyclists and pedestrians, any thoughts, any response on that?
Yes, with respect to the conflicts, it is an item that's in the list of priorities. You'll see it about halfway down there, trail etiquette signage. I'm going to go back and reevaluate the scoring that gets, and I think that probably should be a higher priority than what's shown now. And we'll look at, I'll provide some information in this update of the age-friendly plan that talks about what kind of signage and other things that the town can do to just promote people safely sharing the pathways. I agree with the use of bell. Typically the sign that you see though says use bell or voice when passing, because it's perfectly acceptable to use your voice as well. But the point is, either way, you're not surprising the heck out of someone by just zooming past them without any warning. So certainly that and other etiquette is this kind of thing we want to encourage all trail users, pedestrians, cyclists, and others.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, just briefly to follow up on that. When we were doing our outreach for the accessibility team, for the accessibility plan, it's very much echoes what we've just heard. And a lot of it to deal with the trails. I'm just wondering if either the consultant or staff have sort of looked at the accessibility plan as sort of its draft form now, which has a lot of the feedback from those sessions, as this is significant overlap with the age-friendly transportation plan, in all honesty. And the only other point too is when we're talking about mixed uses, I love the sight of nonagenarians with a walker on some of those new trails, but I think we should also remember some folks are hard of hearing. I'm thinking of my dad. And so if we're just using auditory cues, sometimes that might not be sufficient. So looking at how to have just a consistent, this is where you pass, this is where you walk, and might be safer, just because I think the Angie, the accident you referred to, if I recall correctly, the bicyclist was going way too fast. He heard coming behind you, one person moved one way, he dodged, and the person sort of moved a little bit because they weren't sure where to go, and then they ran into each other really, really badly. So I don't know how we do that because it's difficult as a town to take that on, but I just want to highlight with our unique demographics, we might have a few people where auditory alone isn't sufficient.
Yes, I ride my bike quite often, and I have a very loud bell. And I was going along Harlech where you can have 5 people side by side. So I'm ringing my bell, and finally I got really close. I said, "Excuse me, move over." And they said, "Oh, that's what that bell was ringing for." so it takes a while for people to learn that, you need to be careful and share the road. A lot of it is common sense. So just, Richard, just from next steps, can you give us a summary of, I know you mentioned it throughout your presentation, but just so we all know, what is the next step in this process?
Okay, so next steps are that we would like to hear your feedback. We've heard some feedback tonight, and I've been making notes the whole way through, but we'd like to hear any other feedback you have. Send an email to the town. That email address was put up on the screen there earlier, but you can also get to it through the town's website. It's qbtown@qualicumbeach.com. Send us your feedback by email by the end of this month. So we've got 2 weeks to the end of November to get us your feedback, because then we need to kind of cut things off and wrap up the plan, incorporate that additional feedback. We'll look at the list of projects, make any updates and changes and additions. Then I will have a report ready for council, and I understand that is currently scheduled to be presented to council on January 17th. So that's basically what the remaining steps are in this process for the 2023 update of the age-friendly plan.
Thank you, Richard. And from the town's perspective, we're also going to start our strategic, we're almost finishing up our strategic plan, and we're starting with our budget plan. So this may be very timely, where we may be able to have to make some adjustments of what our priorities are. Any further comments, Mr. Beer? Ms. Varela? Thank you. Well, thank you. And I want to thank staff that are working very hard. They were here this morning early because we had a strategic planning session from, I think, was it 10 o'clock till about 3, and staff was working very diligently to cover all the issues that the council has raised and the public, and with this. So staff, kudos for all the work you put into it. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Richard. We would have loved to have you here, but I think you did pretty good doing it from a distance. So on behalf of council, thank you, staff, for all the work. Thank you, Richard, and thank you to be part of this presentation and your input. Have a good evening, and I ask council now to make a motion to adjourn. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Young, discussion, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.